This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the G-Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a G-Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the G-Spot. I'm Katie. I am super excited and honored to be here with my dear friend, Siva Mohan, who's coming to us from beautiful Mexico. And Siva's going to tell us lots about herself and about her practice, but I just want to start off by saying she has an incredibly impressive bio. She is a medical doctor with a background in neuroscience, psychiatry. She also is an Ayurvedic practitioner, and beyond that, she's an incredibly raw, real, fun, wonderful woman that I consider a friend, and also one of our incredible and adored teachers here at the Shakti School. So Siva, welcome to the G-Spot.
Oh, thanks. That was way better than a formal bio.
I know, we don't need a formal bio. So we have been having an ongoing conversation for several years about so many things. And before we kind of dive into some of those juicy topics, I'm just really curious, as an Indian woman, your background in Ayurveda and your history with Ayurveda, and maybe your childhood with Ayurveda and your journey with Ayurveda to where you are now. Because I'm sure for me as a Western woman, it's a little bit different.
Oh, that's so interesting. My grandma came to live with us in the States when I was born to help my mom raise me. And she was sort of like that village remedy woman, midwife. Like, she birthed 16 kids of her own.
Wow. Did you say 16?
16.
Wow.
Because I didn't have birth control, So I definitely was raised with a lot of like, oh, don't go outside with wet hair. And, oh, if you have a tummy ache, let's rub some, let's toast some cumin seeds in the oil and rub it in your belly button, and all kinds of interesting things like that. Like hands-on, touching, oiling, weird spices were definitely part of the background. And then when I went to med school, I remember giving my grandmother such a hard time, like, Grandma, beets don't build your blood just because they're red, or I don't get sick because my hair is wet. It's called virus, But I didn't understand the integration of the two. I was too narrow in my understanding of science, and I didn't see Ayurveda as science because I just didn't have that language and that understanding. And then she passed away, and I was my baby girl was 4 months old, and I just was feeling like, man, I really want to raise my kids with all of that too. And I kind of was in my like sort of quarter life crisis with my career of like, I don't really want to be an international public health consultant right now because I have a baby. I just want to chill out. And I had just opened a yoga studio. And so I thought, okay, great. Like, let me study Ayurveda just to like be a mom that can bring that to my family. Because my mom went like 180 the other direction, like modern medicine and all that. And then I fell in love with it. And then it just was like, I feel like in Western medicine, we're like listening to like the first 2-3 notes of a song, and in Ayurveda, like you could hear the whole song, And if anyone would have asked me like back then, like, would I be doing what I do? Like, first of all, what I do doesn't even really exist. I don't know how to describe it. Like, I'd tell people I'm a witch doctor now, because it's like, how do I describe like attending to the physical and the emotional and the spiritual and bringing in all modalities that we have access to at that time and space, like really cleaning up the energetics of your life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what Ayurveda gave me. But to your comment, I very much felt like an American woman coming at it in many ways. Like there were times where I had to wonder, am I culturally appropriating? Because I'm selling this stuff and I'm making good money, you know? And and it's not traditional the way I practice. Do you know what I mean? So I have very much taken what I've learned. You know, I did go study in India with some greats and taken that very traditional training and molded it into something very integrationistic and very sort of modern. And so I did have my own sort of like journey with like, is that bad? Is that wrong? I had other very traditional sort of practitioners around me and in Nama and stuff that were like, no, what you're doing is not Ayurveda. And I loved in your last podcast when you're talking about how modern application is a part of Ayurveda's teachings. And I was just like, yes, you know, because for me, what I came to at the end of that exploration is that modern medicine, modern healing of any kind has to be integrationistic, because like we now have access to all these different modalities for us to not apply them in a curated way to what the situation is really best calling for. It wouldn't make sense. That's staying in the past.
Yeah, and I find it's so curious and interesting, this whole even conversation around cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And, you know, someone like yourself or myself, that we really dedicated our whole lives to studying medicine, be it Ayurvedic medicine, Western medicine, science. I'm interested in everything, and I'm interested in all facets of life. And so I really feel at the core that is the core of the science of life, right? Wanting to understand everything, even beyond a very traditional paradigm of Ayurveda, while simultaneously respecting it. And I find it also interesting. I have met so many modern American or Western women of Indian descent who have had similar journeys as you, where they grew up really wanting and being encouraged to embrace Western psychology, Western philosophy, Western medicine, and maybe even some of them became doctors like yourself. But most of those people that I've met haven't fully really gone back to Ayurveda, or, you know, it seems almost like, it reminds me of when I was living in India and I was wearing a shalwar kameez and I went to the mall and I was seeing all the Indian women wearing jeans and t-shirts and studying to be doctors and in Western universities, and I was studying to be an Ayurvedic practitioner. It's like this cultural reversal in some ways that has happened, where like Indian grandmothers were like thanking me for studying Ayurveda because their granddaughters weren't as interested in it or even poo-pooed it.
Totally. And I mean, I think like that has so much to do with the post-colonial overlays, because even how we're, you know, like subjecting Ayurveda, like why are we studying the effects of like curcumin extract in rats? What a waste of research money. Do you know what I mean? And it's like what we've learned for thousands of years, and that wisdom isn't good enough, and we have to now validate it in a system that doesn't make any sense. Like curcumin extract isn't going to produce what the whole wisdom of the whole plant of turmeric, and we know this in Ayurveda, but yet all these doctors, Indian BAMS doctors, feel strongly that we have to validate it in the existing framework. But while knowing that the existing framework is so limited.
Right.
So
exactly.
Really, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, stand up and understand the power of your of your wisdom of observation of thousands of years is going to be much more than any randomized clinical trial. But I don't see the Indian doctors and top heads of Ayush even doing that.
No, that's been my experience as well. And it feels almost like, rather than understanding things through a geographic or racial lens, it would be more effective to understand things through an indigenous earth-based lens, because those are my people as well. You know, my original people were of the earth, just as yours were, and had these indigenous earth mama based traditions that are almost, I mean, they mirror Ayurveda almost explicitly in terms of seeing the world as elemental and seeing animating force in all of life. And I think that's been my experience with quote traditional Ayurveda as well, that there's a desire for it to be validated by what I consider a male gaze, you know.
Yeah,
This sort of
I agree. And I think like in doing so, like look what we're doing, like, you know, we've really sucked out all of the like spiritual and emotional stuff. I mean, when you go to a practitioner in India, like they're doing just exactly what we're doing in modern medicine right now, like feel your pulse, listen to your tongue, write a script.
yeah.
Like where, like, and so it's just like so much is lost in that, because all the feminine, the intuitive, the emotional, the spiritual has been dehydrated out of it, which is the same mistake that we made in Western medicine. And while Western medicine is now like, oh, that's really important, and there's so many advances in Western medicine happening to now include the emotional, the functional, the experiential, the beyond physical, and Ayurveda is going the other direction. And so that's, I mean,
Yeah,
for me,
I know, it's so ironic.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that's why I don't actually call myself an Ayurvedic practitioner, or like, you know, become a part of NAMA, because I don't want to do that. And, you know, to your point of being from a tradition, everyone's from a tradition, like literally everyone's lineage goes back to some ancient wisdom, and every single one of them are saying like all the same major things. And like, that's why I really love integration, because I feel like this is a time when we need to find the commonalities, not the differences. Because, you know, like if we look at what's going on with racism or, you know, sexism or blah, 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 any kind of religious, it's all based on this divisive, this is how you're different and not and inferior, and it
Us
should be
versus
different.
them.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, you know, even when so many people were trying their best to show up to support things in racism recently, then they were getting criticized for the way in which they were doing it. And it became like everyone was scared, even of like, how do I support? And like, you know, is it okay for me to support being white because I'm going to be attacked, you know, or like, or being, you know, not whatever. Or if I'm a man, you know, what can I say in Me Too that, it's just like, we need to stop that. We need, like,
Well, it
really,
seems, and I 100% agree, and like so glad you're bringing that up, because I've been feeling that for so many weeks and months now, of understanding the nervous system component, watching what's going on in the news and social media, and understanding that it's sending so many people into freeze who genuinely want to be of loving service. Because if I'm damned if I say this, and I'm damned if I do that, and I do this and I can't do that, but if I'm silent, then I'm violent, but if I speak up, blah blah blah, like it sends the nervous system into freeze and collapse, which is the worst thing we want for people right now, especially in terms of their immunity.
yeah. So it's just really, I mean, it's really, I think, something we need to encourage as much as we can, to like stop nitpicking on how people are trying to show that they care, and stop labeling all this like, this is toxic positivity, and this is white guilt, and this is good, and this
Like
is that.
when someone told me like love and light are not allowed here, and I understand that we don't want to spiritually bypass, or and we need to use anger constructively, but when someone told me love and light are not allowed here, I was like, you know what, I'm out. I'm sorry, like for me, love and light are still going to be a good thing.
Or even spiritual bypass, like really F that. You know what I mean? That, like, it's not bypassing, like it's the root. So like if someone's saying I'm with only the capacity to do the energetic work on the inside and in my microsphere of my life, that's my capacity, that still counts. That's not
Totally.
a bypass for me.
Exactly.
And like obviously we need to do all of the work. We need to do the work in the physical plane and the non-physical plane. And if there's warriors over in the non-physical plane, they should be honored and not criticized for the work that they do, because it's just as important, you know?
So
And
beautiful.
Yeah.
Very
Thanks.
important. You know, and I think we have to remember that there are some beings that are highly sensitive and empathic and delicate, and so many of us are working through intergenerational trauma and from all walks of life. And so I think just remembering that we're doing the best that we can and walking into that place of the root. You know, I think about that spiritual teacher I love, Tara Brach, and she says this need to other, you know, this sort of like desire to do this sort of othering, and the need for radical love. And I just really like feel that so strongly. Like, how can we show up with radical love? I'm seeing some things online that are just so concerning from, quote, both sides, and that just seem to be an embracing of violence and an inability to transmute and digest and metabolize our own emotional body. And then it just sort of gets spewed out at everyone. And
Yes.
I think people are waking up to that.
I hope so, because it's just like, this is not like for us to stay there divided, criticizing each other about how we show up to shift things in a positive direction is not going to head us very far in that positive direction. And that's exactly the point, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, how do we get closer and more loving and connected? And I mean, whether we like it or not, we are now one people. We are now one people. And I think the coronavirus really made us realize that we are actually one tribe, more than ever.
Yeah. And then, you know, all of the beautiful coming together globally around Black police brutality I've never seen the world come together that powerfully before for one cause, you know? And like, no one was paying attention to that because everyone was so focused on the problem. And I think that like what we need to all remember is we have to go back to the commonality and the coming together energies and perspectives and thoughts and beliefs, not the divisive ones that we were just talking about. And that also, if we keep our attention focused on the problem and the what is, then we're just going to attract more of the what is. And that it might be a little shift here, a little shift there in the details, but the core frequency of what is will stay. And we need to collectively be in the what could be and start operating and thinking and speaking and honoring each other in the what could be. You know, all these people that are online taking the time to like, you know, break down what's an okay way to not be racist or whatever, that is all in the wrong direction. And these are like spiritual leaders and healers and teachers, and they're missing the point, I think. But that's my opinion.
So in that vein, this kind of brings us to what we were speaking of before you and I got on the call, of like calling things and co-creation and calling things. Like right now I'm really I've gone through a painful past couple weeks, letting go of what I had hoped to be like a long-term relationship, and just realizing that it wasn't, and getting out when I needed to, and it feels like the right decision. But in that, it's brought me into this really stark revelation of really wanting to hone my skills at being able to have a vision for myself. And I think if we can do that on the individual, we can do that on the collective, and we can do it simultaneously. And I'm just really thinking about hope. And one of the things that I've learned with trauma studies and neuroscience in the brain is that when you are in a traumatized state, a depressed state, an anxious fight or flight state, whatever that state is, the brain literally doesn't use the prefrontal cortex in the same way. And so you can't have hope. You can't see a bigger vision. You can't have a future vision for yourself. And I'm thinking about our conversation online, the last 2 weeks of my life where I've felt so fucking sad and just feeling like I don't have a future vision, and knowing that I can and I will, and that there's a grieving period. And I feel like all of us have been in this collective grieving period, whether it be coronavirus or police brutality and racism, whatever it might be on the individual level. And one of the things I love about you is your knowledge of and practice of calling things in, bigger vision. So maybe just speaking to that, and maybe some of the science around that, and some of the quote airy fairy witch doctor stuff around it.
Yeah. So what struck me in what you said was, you said, I got out when I needed to. And I'm going to actually challenge that and say you didn't. And I think that's at the root of going into the primal brain. You know what I mean? So what ends up happening is we have an inner awareness that this
Wait,
is
can
not
I pause
personal.
and get clarity?
Yeah.
You're saying that I actually didn't, that there was a voice before that.
Yeah. And that
Oh
you
yeah, 100%.
didn't line up your words and your actions with that inner wisdom. You didn't trust it, right? And so we stay in situations, experiences, relationships, whatever, that we know we're getting all kinds of signals from our emotional body, our physical body, and we're just overriding them. And
Right.
that's what really puts us in the primal brain, because it ends up being like, you know, think about what the inner psyche is saying. Like, I'm trying to tell you something. And your mind is like, shut up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm not acknowledging you. Like, you're not important over here. Like, I'm choosing other than, I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to prioritize your needs or communication. So imagine how the inner psyche feels. Like, if anyone hears that stuff, you're like, ah, right? And then that's what puts us into the sympathetic, because it's like that same exact feeling. Like, imagine it on the outside. Like, if you were trying to save someone from like, you can see that they're about to do something that's really going to hurt them and make them suffer. And you're like, stop, like, save yourself, stop. I'm trying to tell you, you know, and you're watching it go down, right? Like, immediately you're like, I'm already starting to get my adrenals pumping just talking about imagining it, right? So how can your inner psyche not go through the same experience? So I really, really think that it's that moment when we start to ignore the inner wisdom and message and the feedback from our emotional body and our physical body, and we use our mind to rationalize and justify and blah, 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 to make choices otherwise. As soon as
and I think, just to add to that, I remember the exact moment when my inner voice was like, this is not for you. And it's not to make this person bad or wrong. They're wonderful and lovely. It was just, this isn't for me. And I've thought a lot about, why do we override? Why do beautiful, brilliant, intelligent, intuitive beings like the ones that listen to this podcast, why do we override that voice? And what I've come to realize is that, you know, that there is a part of us that so deeply wants connection that we are willing to override that inner knowing, and you know, not to make it that this part of us is just this horrible thing that has terrible wishes for us. It's actually a part of us that deeply wants connection.
Well, the definitely, like, there's a gazillion ways to describe the answer to why, right? And like, we could say that it's from your particular experiences in the lives that you've had in this spirit, and what traumas you've experienced in those lives, and what feels deeply familiar in that way. It could be karmic connections with that particular person that you're just unaware of, but it's like all kinds of different subconscious stuff, right? I mean, here's the truth. Like, you can have connection. If it really was just about connection, like, you know how to get connection all over the place, right? But it was something more than that, right? It's about, I have this vision of romantic partnership, and I'm looking for the person that has the closest match to that I think I can create this vision with, and this person seems to be the closest match that I've had to that, and so I'm scared to let go of this close match, because what if I don't get a closer match to that, and I have to release the vision, right?
100%. Yeah, you've literally just like drawn out exactly my experience. So how do we, so listen to the voice of intuition in the moment. And I have to tell a quick story about intuition voice. When I was in Hawaii, I met a Hawaiian elder woman, and she was working with me, and she told me, you have such an amazing gift of being so tuned to your intuitive voice. And now your job is just to listen to it. Like, some people have to work at getting their intuitive, like I already personally have mine.
Yeah.
And she said, if you don't obey it, you'll just get, like, the lessons will just be harder and harder. And she told me this story, Shiva. She was young woman in Hawaii. She was hitchhiking, and she was pulled with her boyfriend, and some car pulled over, and they had hitchhiked a bunch. It was back in like the 70s. And they pulled over, and she just had this intuitive knowing that said, do not get in this car. And she was like, well, that makes no sense. This is a really nice car. This guy's nicely dressed. Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, on the outside, this guy looks great. So she overrode the voice of her intuition. She got in the car. He ends up taking them to this amazing mansion where he's like, just stay the night here. And again, her intuition was like, do not stay here. Something's wrong. But she saw this beautiful house and this friendly, charismatic person, and she didn't listen. Well, that night he came in and he raped her. And she went on to tell me how she doesn't have trauma from it anymore. She processed through it, and she sees it as this great gift, because she said, I never, ever again did not heed that inner voice. Like, even though this horrible thing happened to me, and I would never wish it on myself or others, I never doubted that voice again. And that story just struck with me, because I've heard the intuitive voice so many times and just been like, you know what, maybe not. Let me justify it with my mind, or like you said, like, and I feel like my greatest gift is the ability to really see the beauty in people. But that is also the dark side of that, is being able to justify everything.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. So, like, as you strip away the layers of distraction and the protective layers that we put on ourselves as we went through our early life experience, we are taught to don't do what you feel, listen to the experts, listen to the teacher, obey the rules, don't be a menace.
Don't ask for too much.
All of those things, right? And what all that's saying is basically shut up your inner voice and use your mind to control your inner voice, right? So we're raised like this. So for all of those listening that are like, I don't have my intuition, you do. It's just that it's kind of quiet, because like a child, if you don't listen to it for so many years, it stops speaking, right? But then again, like a child, like if you start listening to it, it doesn't shut up. And it gets louder and louder. So that's the good news, is that if you take those quiet moments, if you you do those practices that plug you back into your self, the quality time with yourself I always talk about in my classes, of like that 30 minutes a day, or maybe it's journaling, or maybe it's meditating, or maybe it's doing therapy, or whatever it is, but the things that bring you into like, what do I really feel and about a situation, not what do I think about it, but what do I really feel about it? What are the feelings that I'm in right now?
What is my body saying?
I mean, that's a somatic feeling is a good entry point into emotional body feeling. But I really think like the start is to recognize what you're feeling. Like with a lot of people, adults, I have to bring out like the kindergarten feeling chart, because they don't have feeling words and they don't know how to describe their feelings. And they start off with, well, I think, and then they're telling me all of their thoughts and beliefs around the topic, but they're not telling me actually how they feel, right? So once we start that practice, you can bring back the intuition, and you've obviously done a ton of that work. So it makes sense that like your layers are stripped down and you have access to that. But then, like you said, it's a whole nother thing to be able to really trust and listen to it, because we've been taught to not trust it for so long. And if you think about how many generations like feeling and intuition has been, it's witchy or it's woo-woo. I even talk about it this way, like to other people, because I feel like I have to have it be digested. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And how resistant, even some of my closest friends recently, I've said some things to them that are just really insightful and could totally change the course of their lives if they were able to hear it, and they're not. Do you know what I mean? And it's because I'm listening to what they're feeling, and I can hear the resonance in the inside of them, and they're so stuck in their mind that they literally respond to me with all of their justifications that they're doing internally, maybe even subconsciously. And it's so obvious to me because I'm in this practice. And so I guess my points are is that for anyone out there who feels disconnected, you can reconnect, and it's just a practice, and it gets stronger and stronger, and that everybody's in this same boat, in that we're all like, I'm not perfectly listening to my intuition all the time, but like that Hawaiian woman, I have learned when I don't, it's never a good experience. And so now I'm a lot more fierce about it.
Was there like a moment when you were like, wow, I'm going to start listening, and you really shifted, or was it just over time?
No, it was gradual for sure. And I mean, like I stayed in my sort of unhealthy patterns of my marriage we were together for 17 years. And so how long and how many times I broke up with him or tried to end it, like my intuition kept saying something, but we had kids and I had made this commitment and blah, 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 blah up here. And so even myself, I really stayed toggling for so long in it. But like in my current relationship, there was a point where, he lives in London, I live in Tulum. And there was a point where it was like, okay, we just had this amazing connection and fell in love and know that we have similar values, and we're in our 40s and you know what you want a lot more. And it doesn't, like, when you've already tried so many different kinds of chocolate, like you don't need really more than one bite to know this is a chocolate that you really like, right? So he's a chocolate I really like, and I knew that, and he knew that about me. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, no matter which way, if we're going to progress in this relationship towards what we're saying we want, I'm going to have to reroute my life in some regard. And I'm unwilling to even take the beginning steps of doing that without the level of commitment of like engagement or marriage, because I knew it wouldn't feel good to me. I just wouldn't. I would feel too vulnerable. I would be like looking for every sign of like, is it going to end? Is it not? I would feel like unsettled inside. And then I would push the relationship away because of trying to alleviate that inner restlessness or unsettledness.
Wow.
I knew that, right? And then on the other side, if we just stayed in this long distance relationship, and I moved back to Mexico, kind of like, okay, I know, and he's saying he knows, but he's not quite ready. And so I'm just over here, like in a holding space, kind of pretending like I'm living my normal Mexican life, but like on hold with that, like waiting for my man to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't feel good either. And so I broke up with him. And yet this is like a long time manifesting this guy, right? Like he's got it, like it just feels amazing. And so the fact that at this point, it's not just listening to your inner voice, that's one way to describe it, but putting yourself in the different options that are ahead of you and seeing how would that feel, right? And I knew path one of like rerouting my life without the level of commitment didn't feel good. And I also knew trying to continue as is without acknowledging this huge shift and thing and continuing to give more energy to it and investing my heart further without that commitment also didn't feel
So
good.
basically you broke up with him. In other words, you were willing to say no to this really great thing because you were so committed to your manifestation, to your vision of what you knew you wanted and deserved.
Well, not really my vision and manifestation, because then I would have stayed, right? So like, okay, I manifested this relationship and this guy, and this was my vision, and my vision is family. And so on the one hand, like we get really caught up in our minds of like, wait, this is my goal and I'm supposed to be lining up with my goal. And it would have been very easy for me to be like, most women would have been like, of course you need more time, honey. Like, like this is really fast. It's totally understandable. Like I get it. But if I'm feeling ready to make that commitment and he's not, and I know that, me giving him more time would have put me in a very like not yummy feeling place emotionally. So really what it was is I was willing to let it go because I was so committed to, I will not put myself in any situation that doesn't feel emotionally good, period.
Wow, I just got a fucking full body chills. Say that again, Siva.
Yes, I
Say
will
that again.
not put myself in any situation which does not feel good for my emotional body, period. That could be a contract, that could be a lunch date, that could be, a long distance relationship. It could be whatever. I'm not going to let my mind, override.
So it wasn't that he was bad or wrong. It wasn't that you were trying to convince him. It wasn't that he didn't need more time. It's just that you weren't willing to put yourself in a situation that didn't make you feel good emotionally.
Yeah, because think about it. Like, I didn't want to. A third path might have been to really try to wear him down and talk him into it or giving him an ultimatum, right? And that didn't feel good either. I don't want to like feel like I talked my man into like being ready to commit to me at the level of engagement or marriage. Like I just was like, listen, you're in that space and that's beautiful and that's appropriate and it's good. And I really want to meet your need and you take the time you need. But I also need to stay feeling good for me, and the best feeling path, even though breaking up would have been like devastating and heartbreak and all of that, it's like I would be able to be back in the sexy Siva show and like fully alive in that.
Oh my God, I love you. I'm so ready to be back in the sexy Bunny Silcox show. So you're saying, yeah, you're like, I can get back in some where I feel good.
And I know how to do that and I know how to operate that. And that feels, even though there will be a temporary heartbreak and sadness and whatever, it's that faith that like, it's me staying in an amazing vibration that attracted him in the first place.
Wow.
So for me to turn this relationship because of the logistics and because of his needs and because of whatever, for me to put myself in a situation that it didn't feel amazing would pollute the whole energetic, and I would recreate the patterns that I had with my old relationship.
Wow, you're amazing. Genius. Okay, so I know everybody's listening and is like, is this a podcast or is this Katie Silcox getting a download from her Ayurveda bestie? And it's both. But I think these are the best podcasts. I feel a little bit vulnerable. This is a little more personal than normal, but I feel like it's so good because this is the very thing that so many of our listeners go through and are going through. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you're single or married, you guys. Like, I'm reading this book about being emotionally lonely. And you can be emotionally lonely inside of a relationship. And that's really the worst. But I want to go back to this, your path. So you decided to choose the vibration that allowed you to stay in that resonant frequency of joy and sexy Shiva show. So what happened with him?
Yeah, every detail of how I approached it, I really kept in mind, I need to line my words and actions up with my intention to feel really damn good in my heart and my emotional body, right? So even the breakup, like I could have like really let him have all the reasons why, and I didn't. I sent something really beautiful that was like, listen, I need to withdraw my heart right now, and I could tell you the reasons why, but honestly, I'd rather leave you with having the honor of being the only man I even ever considered. Do you know what I mean? And that felt so good to say, and I didn't have any like ickiness around it. And even though I had some like hurt and anger and frustration with the fact that he wasn't ready where I was, and get what happened afterwards. It turned out that his block, so I break up with him and I just focus on like, I'm surrounding myself with amazing people. My mom's cooking food. I'm in nature hikes. I'm listening to my favorite music. You know, I'm taking some mushrooms, like just keeping my vibration, whatever I need to do to keep my vibration in a damn good place, because that's all I'm committed to. That's it. Like, we are literally here just to be full of light and to raise our vibration. And that, like, I'm not going to not listen to that. Right. And so even with him, it's beautiful. And I'm like, well, maybe he'll come around one day, right? 24 hours later, he's like, don't drop this, please. Like, don't close the door yet. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to stay in limbo either. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm giving you an ultimatum or a deadline. It's too much pressure. It's awkward. I just don't want to do that. And what he ends up revealing is that he didn't have his divorce paperwork finalized. And that was his big block. And he was too embarrassed to let me know, because he views me like up here as this like badass that's on top of her shit and like, you know, super aligned. And like, he thought that if I knew that he didn't have that, I would judge him as like blah, 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 blah. And like feel like he was good enough for me. And meanwhile, he has no idea the type of shit I've dealt with men and witnessed. And like, I totally understood it. Like he was being nice and trying to keep her on his health insurance and whatever. The point is like, he got to have that release with me. I was immediately able to forgive him for that and understand it and love him through it. And I was like, what do you really want here? You know, now that you've told me the real reason you were blocked. He's like, I want you to forgive me. I want you to trust me. And I want you to marry me, you know? And I was like, okay, the forgiveness I can do right away. The marrying, I'm not sure. And with regards to the trust, like, is there anything else that I need to know about? And what I need you to promise me is that when you're feeling conflicted about something in your mind, before you assume what my approach is going to be, my reaction is going to be, I need you to let me in. And I need it to be a collaborative solution about what the approach is, right? And then I told him, and you know what? My entire family just fell in love with you and us. And they just like nurtured me through what we thought was a breakup. And so you're going to have to call them directly and explain your situation and ask for their forgiveness and ask for their blessing. Because I, in my last relationship, already spent too much time trying to defend the poor choices of my partner. And I will not do that again. And he responded so beautifully and was like, absolutely, I'm asking them to become family. So very much so, like, you shouldn't be responsible for explaining my choices and my blocks. And, you know, like, they should have a chance to directly. And I didn't realize how much good came out of that, right? So had I not drawn the line for what just didn't feel right to me, we wouldn't have had this beautiful experience where he got to really learn he can tell me anything and it's safe. Where we got to feel what it feels like to have some kind of like hidden blocky thing between us, and how gross it felt, and the relief we felt afterwards was really a good lesson for us to learn and to never have that between us. And I didn't realize how important it was for me, given that my family didn't really approve of and love my last choice of partner, to have that blessing and approval.
Wow, beautiful.
So when, we talk about like parallel realities, right? Like when in quantum physics, I could never understand like different versions of me in different time, space, reality. It just didn't feel like a possibility. But all of a sudden I got it. It's about potentiality, right? So had I not shown up for prioritizing my emotional wellness in that one decision, had I said, sure, honey, no problem, take more time, I'll just go on and, stay in limbo and kind of like be patient with you.
And feel anxious.
And because that's what I think a loving girlfriend does, is not pressure someone, and all those reasons. I'm sure you guys could come up with a ton. Had I done that, I would have created a reality where I'm anxious and feeling like vulnerable and restless and like unchosen. And like he would have still had this little secret that he's trying to finalize this paperwork on the back end to like be ready, that he's like hiding.
Be a man.
And like I would have felt that weird secret, and because I was feeling it, I just didn't know what it was. I thought he was just not ready or emotionally blocked, and it didn't match all of the other stuff. And I really think it would have like been a not good feeling place, and I probably would have been very reactive and like sabotaged the relationship in a certain way. And by me choosing to do that, I had all of these incredible healing experiences with him. My family felt even more in love with him. And then we got engaged. And so now literally I'm here in Mexico because the paperwork's not all done for us to move forward with our plan. But the feeling of it, the parallel reality it could have been with that one choice, is so entirely different. I feel settled inside. I feel clear. I feel chosen. I feel loved. I feel like he's invested so much in this.
And what really strikes me, what I'm working with myself, and of course none of us are perfect at this, but like it's so easy to look at the other person and blame them, but to really look at myself and be like, what is the masculine in me that needs to be healed? And in that moment, when you made the decision to lovingly let him go with so much integrity and no manipulation, which is the dark side of the feminine, when you did that, I'm getting chills, Siva. You were the divine masculine for yourself. You chose you. You chose you. I'm covered
and I
in
protected me.
And you
right?
protected you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally crying, everybody. I'm literally crying.
I don't know, like the personal story is how we learn best, Katie. Like, I feel like everyone listening to this podcast that's stayed in a relationship, but even like I have so many clients that have stayed in jobs that are toxic relationships, or that they know that all of what we're saying applies to. And like the real root reason we stay is just fear. It really is. It's like we don't believe. And then when we don't believe, we're a vibrational match for situations which match that, right? And I didn't even take the time to believe. I just was on a very primal feeling based level, like, no, that doesn't feel good. No, that doesn't feel good. No, that doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel great, but it's the best feeling choice. And so I'm going to take that one.
So this idea of we stay because we're afraid, but what we're afraid of is that nothing better will come along. And that comes back to this vision of what's possible. And the big trust fall that you did in that moment, you said, I trust that, like, actually there is going to be something that feels right. Like, you did a huge trust fall.
Yeah. And actually the trust was not even that there is something that's going to be that feels right, because I don't know that. The trust was Listen, if I spend this lifetime alone, like, it's okay. I have so much potential in my career. I've got these amazing kids, and I seem to attract really hot men all over the world that I can have. There can be Mr. Cuba and Mr. New Zealand and, Mr. whatever. And that might just be my life. And it might not be the beautiful brown family vision, And like, it's okay. I'm still committed to feeling damn good while I'm here and to raising my vibration. So I let go
Can I just
of
say
that.
that? Can I just say that I'm slightly jealous that I can't have a beautiful brown family vision because I'm a white person? I'm like, I want to be able to say that, but I can't.
But you can have your beautiful, like, Southern
Yeah.
family or whatever. Like,
Southern family.
it doesn't matter, Like, I think, like, that's just my funky name is for, like,
But
sexy Siva
that,
show and beautiful
the
brown
sexy
family.
Siva, I love the sexy Siva show and the beautiful brown family dream. And like, but what's so potent about that I was missing, that I'm so glad you corrected me, was it's not that I did a trust fall and I said to God or I said to the universe, I trust you. I know you have some better man coming for me. It's like you just trusted that like life is actually beautiful as it is, in in a way, like unconditionally you trusted.
I don't know if I trusted that life is beautiful as it is, because it really isn't when you're not in a good place, then you're attracting people, situations, and experiences that feel like shit.
So
Like,
what was the trust fall into?
I think the trusting was trusting my emotional body that doesn't feel good to me. Long distance didn't feel good to me. And rerouting my life to live with him without the level of commitment didn't feel good to me. And even breaking up with him and going back to my incredible life in Tulum didn't feel super great, but it really felt the best. And so what I trusted was, if I keep choosing the highest vibration and the greatest alignment inside, that I'm going to attract people, situations, and experience that lead to higher vibration.
Okay, got it. Okay.
It's really like I'm trusting the law of attraction almost, or I'm really trusting that when I choose my highest vibrational choice, I attract a higher vibrational life experience. And I know how to do that. And I've done that because where I came from in those lower vibrational states all came from choices where I was internally conflicted, which keeps us in the lower vibration. And the internal conflict is that not listening when we know something doesn't feel good and staying there anyways. And, we can talk about that in so many different languages, like the primal brain, or not listening to your intuition, or not being embodied enough in your feminine, or blah, 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 blah.
Or not, or for me, it shows up as, I'm such an emotional creature. I'm going to make a less vibrationally adequate choice because I can't bear, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, I just think about Ayurveda and like how the right food choices, the doing abhyanga, like all these things that people get so caught up in, oh, I have to do all of these things every day. And it's like, no, you're doing those things because they bring the organism into a higher vibrational experience.
And look at your pattern, like look at how you were with your yoga teacher and that sort of toxic relationship where you knew it didn't feel good at a certain time, but you stayed, right? And then look what happened when you trusted that this doesn't feel good, and you finally were like, this doesn't feel good, and I have to line up my words and actions with that awareness, right? Then so much blossomed for you.
Well, the Shakti school was born.
And your book, and like everything, right? So it's a very good example of like, had you stayed in a place of internal conflict where you're not acting based on your awareness, there was a whole nother parallel reality possible for you. And then when you acted, where you actually acted based on your awareness, a whole nother parallel reality opened up for you. You have the same experience. So you just need to remember that. And then the first signs that something really isn't feeling good to you, walk away, move away from it, because the only important thing is to not be in internal conflict and to be lined up that awareness.
And this doesn't mean, I know what you want our listeners to know is like, this doesn't mean you won't have conflict, right? Like you can be with your beloved and there can be a conflict, but it's that deep resonation of like something feels off here. I'm like uncomfortable on a soul level.
Yeah, to be able to express when something's not feeling good, and to be able to learn what our unmet emotional needs are beneath that unpleasant feeling, and to express them to another and ask for them to nicely be met is a really good skill set that every woman needs to have, first of all. And second of all, when you do apply that skill and you ask nicely for your needs to be met, or you express that something's not feeling good to you, it's the perfect litmus test. Because if someone responds to that in a way that is reactive, attacking, defensive, not coming around to basically in some way saying, oh my God, I care about you feeling good. Like, how can I show up for that? Run away, because that person does not have the capacity. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. They just don't have the capacity to operate on that level. And there's millions of people who do.
This is so personal, but I need to go there because this just feels so important to my life. What about when you're with someone where I am very good, Siva, at expressing my needs. I try to stay conscious in relationships to a fault, right? Mm-hmm. And what about when they say, I hear you, I want to do that, I will do that, and they say all the right words, but it never happens. I mean, that's really why.
And you run, because what you realize is like, okay, again, it's limited capacity. Like that person has the volition and they have the intention, but they're just not with the capacity yet. And maybe they will be one day. And that's the situation I was in. Right? Maybe you'll get there one day. Great. But right now, I need your actions to line up with your words, and they're just not, honey. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like we could talk for hours, but to leave our listeners and myself, what would you recommend that, most of our listeners are women, that women do every day to really keep this vibrational upliftment or build it, to get so steeped and settled in that place of commitment to one's own heart, really? I mean, what does the daily practice look like for you, I guess, is the question.
Yeah. And I mean, look, like after a certain amount of time, when you build it enough, you don't even need it to be a daily practice. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like you take a digestive tea every day in the beginning, and then you just use it when you need the Agni support in the future, right? So what the daily practice, there's two things that I would recommend. I think one is the time and space to have quality time with yourself, because we just don't do that. Like that could just be laying on the floor or the grass, or just, your yoga mat, or it could be journaling, but it has to be, it's not like, time when you're actively doing something else. Like women will tell me, oh, when I come home from driving the kids to school is my deep thinking time, or whatever. Like, no, that doesn't count. It's got to be time that's quality checking in with how you feel in general and about things. That's prerequisite. Like if you're not with the practice of checking in with how you feel, you're not going to know how you feel.
So you just sit there, you lay there, you put your hand on your heart, whatever, and you say to yourself, how am I feeling?
Yeah, that's it. And, journaling really helps me, because I could easily lay on the carpet and think of 10,000 things, And so when I'm journaling, it kind of forces me to stay focused on expressing where I'm at and what I'm feeling about things, and what my vision is, or how I want to proceed in a way that feels best to me, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing I would say is start bringing in the emotional awareness to your micro decisions, right? Like, okay, do I really want to have coffee this morning, right? Like, what do I really feel like wearing today? Like, what kind of yoga do I really feel would like just feel so yummy today, and that might not be what your brain thinks is your core power or whatever, it might be really like a deep stretch. Do you know what I'm saying? But like, just in every little micro decision, like, do I want to say yes to this play date? Like, there's the reasons, like, oh yeah, it would be good for my kid, and I want to build that relationship, and someone asked me, and it's a good thing to do. But then there's also like, okay, wait, but how does it feel? Like, does it feel depleting? Do I feel excited about it? Right? Like, these kinds of inquiries on a very regular basis to inconsequential decisions is what builds that muscle in a way that is safe, so that when it comes to the big consequential decisions, you have a strong muscle that you've been flexing all this time, that you know you can count on the strength of.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Siva. I feel like this has been, like, without a doubt, the most personal podcast I've ever done, and with you, and like, I just feel like it's probably going to be a fan favorite. And I just thank you so much for being so open and sharing your life. And I think these personal stories really are the most potent teachers. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I really love to teach through story. And, you know, I've been really encouraging people to sign up for Shakti School, for those that are listening and like thinking about it, because I think, you know, I'm definitely teaching through story, and like people are responding so well to it, you know. And also, I didn't even get to tell you, I created a case study sort of program for Shakti schoolers only.
Wow.
So after they graduate, if they want to learn the skills of like really how to be present and to draw out the, you know, the deeper layers with clients, and to teach with their own story, all the stuff that like Nama would say is totally inappropriate.
Yeah. Well, we're no longer members of, we have a conflicted relationship with them. It doesn't feel right. And I think, you know, everyone's so afraid of saying anything, and then no one says anything, and then these entities gain more and more power because everyone's so afraid of saying anything. And like, I mean, that's maybe another podcast we should do together, but let people know we're going to put your website up, Siva, if they want to get in contact with you, follow you, anything you want to let folks know about before we close.
Yeah, I do have a really short and sweet course called Resolving Internal Conflict. So if there's anyone that's listening that's like, where do I even begin on knowing what my internal conflicts are, and like starting to tease them out and learning like how to address them, how to line up my words and actions with the sort of remedial energetics, that might be a great tool. And then obviously, there's the book too, in which I do have a chapter on emotional wellness. That is some of my sort of, I call it leading edge work in how to show up for your emotional body.
Awesome. Thank you so much, lady. This has been a blessing for me, and I'm sure everyone listening.
Let's do it again. I love it.
Yeah, this is an ongoing conversation. Everyone, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Siva.
Bye, love.
Bye, love.
Thank you.
फूटे फूल अपन सुखे फूटे फूल